This is the Page Publishing Book Club. Good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're listening and what time. I'm still Alice Stockton Rosidi, and Rob Barrett is still my engineer, and you, my friend, are checking us out because you need a direction. Am I right? I know I am. You know, we all struggle in different ways when it comes to doing something we've always wanted to do in life, and this show attempts to help you find a way through those struggles so you can write a book. This week, we begin with one shining example of a man who overcame insurmountable odds to accomplish this goal. His name is Frank Hardy, and the story of his life and how he got here is almost as interesting as his first book. It's entitled Rise of the Emancipator. Frank.
First of all, I'm an artist. I'm a self-taught artist. I'm an oil painter, and just something I've always known how to do. I'm a high school dropout, as a matter of fact. But I've always had this imagination, and I think most of my paintings came from the fact that there were stories. I do these paintings, and behind each painting there's a story. And as I got older, I realized I wanted to write. I always wanted to tell these stories, but I couldn't write, and I'm extremely dyslexic. So I started writing this book about 4 years ago. And it took me this long to write it because, like I said, I'm really not a writer. I'm a storyteller. I do a painting, and then I look at this painting, and behind this painting, there's a whole story that comes from the image that I've created. And so the Emancipator is about a man who would basically falls in love with someone who society says he shouldn't be in love with. And so this man, instead of following tradition, he follows his heart, and the trouble that comes with it, with the breaking of tradition, considering he's the eldest son of a king. And the story is really just an introduction. I'm introducing this man called the Emancipator, because there's probably going to be many, 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 many books about this character. Because what happens is the woman that he's in love with, she's sold into slavery. And he basically decides to take a ship from his father's fleet, and he's going to cross the world to find her. And in the process of doing that, he's following the slave trade, because he has no idea where she is, but he knows she was sold into slavery. And so anytime he finds people who are in bondage, he frees them, hoping that she would be amongst them. And he soon becomes a legend. People soon begin to pray for the day that the Emancipator will come and free them. And whenever he hears about people in bondage, he's hoping that his love will be amongst them. So that's what he must do.
Is this is going to be more than one book, isn't it?
It's going to be a series of books, but it's going to take 3 books just to tell this first story.
Right.
So I'm actually working on the second book right now.
What did you end up doing for a living? I'm curious.
I wanted to be a boxer, fighter. It didn't quite work out, but I learned so much in the boxing ring. I grew up in Selma, Alabama. I actually witnessed the Civil Rights Movement. I was in Selma the day of Bloody Sunday on the Edmonds Pettus Bridge. I saw a lot. Racism in Selma was at its peak. Yeah. I saw a lot of ugly things as a child. And so when I left home, I had this inferiority complex, first of all. Basically, as a young black man, America taught us back at that time that we were a second-class citizen. I had low self-esteem, inferiority complex, and then I couldn't read. I struggled with reading, so I would get teased and I would get in fights. I got in a lot of fights. So as I got older, it was like, well, if I'm going to fight, I may as well get paid for it.
Right. So
that's when I decided I would pursue boxing. After boxing didn't work out, I took a job on the oil rigs. And my first year out there, I had people that I worked with who really tried to make me quit. The oil rig that I was on, I was the first black man to ever work on that rig. I was the only black man on the rig. But I wasn't going to let anybody outwork me.
Yeah.
So that's what I did until they finally recognized me and I started to move up. And by the time I left the oil rig, I was probably the most loved man on the rig. although while I was doing that, I was still training just like I was training to fight because you have to stay in really good condition on an oil rig. After I came home from the oil rig, I kept training, and I saw kids in the community that was going through the same thing I went through. And a lot of them was dropping out of school and ending up in juvenile court. So my wife and I, we opened up a youth center. And for the next 18 years, I ran the youth center. Pull it up on the internet, called Selma Youth Development Center. I was going to teach kids how to box because it was boxing that really gave me the strength to understand what life was about.
Right.
See, in my first boxing match, I was knocked down, but I got up off the floor and I won. And I discovered what it felt like to be proud of my own accomplishment. I had never experienced that. And I took what I learned in that boxing ring and I said, you know, well, this is life. You know, if you're going to be successful in life, first thing you got to do is understand that it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. The important thing is how many times you get up. If you want to be competitive in life, if you want to be successful in anything, you have to expect struggles. You have to expect to get knocked down. And you have to embrace the struggle as part of the process. Because nobody has never accomplished anything because they had an easy road. If you look at all the people that has been successful, it's because of their struggles that made them stronger. It's the tough time that gave them strength. And so when time came to write this book, I knew I didn't have the tools to write. I knew I didn't have the education. But just like I had been teaching all those kids at the youth center, you know, you can't let your struggles defeat you. Just embrace the struggles and you get a better book, you know, you become a better writer, you know. So I'm hopefully, as I continue to write, I think the book tells a great story, but I'll be the first to admit it could have been better written. But like I said, I'm not a writer. I'm a storyteller. And I think what's going to happen now is I'm learning how to become a writer.
Right.
And I think my books will get better as I continue to write.
All right, Frank, good enough. You really are an inspiration. Thank you. Ron Grant experienced a very traumatic event while he was working as a cop, and time again, he imagined what could have happened in the very worst case scenario. It is the basis for his book entitled Miracle Out of the Snow. Ron.
Yes. We had an incident one day where a woman came to the police department and said there was a man out in front of the department with a gun. Sergeant went out the front door. I went out the back door and around the corner to cover him. Well, the sergeant yelled at this guy that was down the sidewalk a ways that he needed to see his hands because he had them in his coat pocket because we were told he had a gun. Well, the guy started walking toward the sergeant. Sergeant didn't have his gun out, but I had mine out, pointed at this guy. The guy kept walking toward the sergeant. Sergeant kept telling him to stop. We've been told you got a gun. The guy kept walking. Well, about the third time, the guy goes, "Oh, you mean this?" and starts to pull out of his coat pocket what I can see is a gun. And I literally start pulling back on my trigger because if he gets it out of his pocket and raises and points at the sergeant, I'm going to shoot him. Well, fortunately, the barrel caught on his pocket, fell from his hand. The sergeant was close enough then to tackle him. And when we took him into custody, he turned out to be an oversized 12-year-old boy with an IQ of about a 6-year-old, and it was a toy gun. And I was literally half a trigger pull from shooting him. And I always had wondered, what if that gun hadn't fallen from his hand, he pointed at the sergeant, and I'd shot him? You know, legally, I would have been justified, but how would I have lived with myself? I mean, yes, that child would have been a victim, his family would have been a victim, but what a lot of people don't understand is I and my family would have been victims too. So that's what my book's based on.
Oh, man, Ron.
People don't understand cops have to make life and death decisions within a fraction of a second.
Yep.
And unfortunately, sometimes the information, like the information I had in that situation, doesn't necessarily turn out to be what you think it is, but you have no way of knowing. And, you know, are there bad cops? Sure, there's bad cops, just like there's bad judges, bad lawyers, bad fast food workers. And I never hesitated in turning in a bad cop. But 90% of cops are just good people trying to do a very difficult job.
I could not agree with you more, Ron. Now, in your book, you imagine the worst case scenario, right?
Well, in my book, I actually had to shoot the guy. Okay. And then it turned out to be an oversized kid that had a low mental capacity and stuff, and it was a toy gun. And so I can't stand the pain any longer. I'm ready to put an end to it, but I keep reflecting back over the past. And at the end, another miracle happens that totally turns my life around again and helps me at least be able to live with what had happened. And one of the other things about my book is I hear about these shooting incidents and stuff, and the cop is always blamed. And like I said, there's bad cops. But I was half a trigger pull, literally, from shooting someone that I know a lot of people would have thought very bad of me, but legally I would have been justified, as I said. But how would I lived with myself? And this, I still get chills to this day when I think back about this, because I know I was literally half a trigger pull from shooting this young boy. And I just thank God that it didn't happen.
I hear you, Ron. We are so often so quick to judge cops, and, we have to remember they are human too. Thank you. All is fair in love and politics. This is the name of Valerie Malone's book that she describes as one woman's tale of small-town drama, heartbreak, and sweet revenge. You've experienced it all, haven't you?
I did. I was the wife in the saga, as the story entails, and lived to tell about it. My husband and I managed to survive that nightmare experience, and I found a way to kind of laugh at it. So people liked it. So I'd send it out, and here we are.
What's the story? What happened?
My husband made a huge mistake and had an affair a few years ago, and we pretty much got a divorce, but it ended up being on our terms. Instead of hiring a bunch of lawyers, we found a way to get through that era in our life. Then this woman who had this affair decided to run for mayor, and she was unapologetic about all of her role and all of the pain. So I just called her on it. I couldn't let her have my hometown. So I wrote the story and campaigned against her, and the karma came around. She lost the election, and then I wrote the story down. And it's just, I'm hoping someone else might find the humor, because it's kind of a painfully funny situation for me anymore.
What's funny about it?
Finding a way to laugh at your own shortcomings, we're all guilty of sins on some level. And while this might seem like I'm just lambasting this woman, it also made me take a deep look at myself too in my life. And if you don't learn to laugh at yourself, you can completely fall to pieces, which I did for a minute, but managed to get back up and go on. And like I said, my husband and I we've survived this. We went through about an 18-month of survival. It's really quite profound. That's another story that I'm writing, is about that survival and how to get through and what you can do. And hopefully anybody else who's gone through that kind of pain can find a way to get through too.
How to get through infidelity.
Exactly, how to survive. Everybody's got to make their own choice as to how they handle this kind of thing. My husband and I had never had any issue like this before in our lives. And it was a bad time and an ugly time, but it causes you, when you fall all the way down, you know what I mean? It was quite a painful time, and it's something I wouldn't wish on anybody, but I wrote it down as kind of a therapy for myself, and someone else read it, and they said, oh, you need to tell that story. That's a good story. So I did, and so here we are.
Why did this woman pursue your husband?
That's just kind of who she is, and what I've observed of her. She's one of those kind of people who just tends to use all people around her to her own advantage. It was really funny because my husband, in defense of everything, said, oh, she was just following her heart. And when I pointed out how many other marriages had nearly ended because of her actions, and I pointed out that she had just followed her heart into all those married men's beds, it maybe made him kind of rethink. She's just a user. That's who she is, in my opinion.
What would be your best advice for women who have suffered infidelity?
Don't go to the dark place. Remember your own value, and don't get sucked down into the pain that can sometimes think about you taking your own life or taking someone else's, because I was there for a minute. I felt that pain. I almost burned down my own house one night in that fear and that anger. And then, thank God, he kept me through till the next morning. And the sun came up, and I never acted on any of those feelings. But don't go to the dark place.
All right, don't go to the dark place, and don't let a cheater become mayor of your hometown. Good advice, Valerie. We have to take a quick break, but we are coming right back. Don't you go anywhere. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books, and unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them, and they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Welcome back to the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Reginald Trawl loved Dragonlance novels when he was a teenager, and they inspired him to write The Gem of Life. It just took him a couple of years to get it out there. What happened, Reginald?
Well, life walked in, and I just wasn't able to do anything with it. I had children, I got married, and everything else came to the forefront. So my writing went to the back burner.
So now you've got time to write.
Correct. It's about the artifact, and the evil person that found that artifact uses its power to raise the dead. And now these dead aren't your normal walk-around mindless zombies. They are exactly as they were when they were alive. The same memories, the same abilities, but they're bound to the person who controls that artifact, who has that artifact. The person who has the artifact raid cemeteries, taking the bodies of the greatest warriors, magic users, and creates this army. And his intentions are to take over the lands. So some of the children of the people who were taken from the cemeteries, they go after the bad guy and try to put their families back to rest.
This doesn't sound like you could write this beginning, middle, and end in one book.
You know, it was supposed to be 3 different books.
Oh, okay.
And again, I was a teenager then. I was very young, so I just kept writing and writing. And I just kept it together as one long book.
Okay. How long?
Over 600 pages, but it's not the size of your normal small novel. To my understanding, if we were to condense it in size, the 600 plus pages would be well over 1,000. So a little bit bigger than I originally anticipated.
Yeah, that's a lot of book.
But I've already started book 2.
Of course you have.
It's continuation of book 1. And I do have a second completely different thing I'm working on too. A third book, but completely different from The Gem of Life in the series there.
Okay.
But this time, I'll definitely make sure not to make it quite as long. I've had a couple of reviews go up on the Barnes & Noble website. For me, that's the joy and the takeaway from this, that somebody somewhere will read what I created and find some enjoyment in it and perhaps be motivated to begin writing on their own.
All right, Reginald. Thank you so much. Good luck with your writing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
All right. I'm glad you finally got moving. That's always good to hear.
Yes.
So many stories like yours. It's like people that have always wanted to write, and then it just takes, 20 years or so for them to get going. And then, boom, they're off. So.
Well, the one thing I would say for anyone who's in that position is never give up on that dream. It's never too late.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I'm going to write a book now. All right?
There you go.
Okay. About my interview with you. How's that?
You know what? I am honored.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. How many people have stopped talking to a sister, a brother, a mother, and for what? Angela Smith wants to help families stay together. It's why she wrote her first book entitled Inseparable Sister. Angela.
It's based off of, how like the relationships with mothers and daughters, Like they had little, like, let me say, incidents when they was children. The mother didn't protect the child the way she should. And then that child grows up damaged. And, you know, when she only needed her mother's love. And it's based on sisters and where they not sticking together, you know, like they could be living right in the same neighborhood. Their kids don't even know who each other are because of something small that happened to them when they were younger that could be fixed.
They don't realize how it tears the family apart. Is that what you're saying?
And then people die in the process that they never get to see again, and then they be left. Some people be left with regret for not being able to say I miss you or I'm sorry. You know, get a chance to make amends.
So did that happen to you?
Like me and my sister, we didn't have a bond with one another because I spent time in prison for the life I chose to live and different things. And you know, our mom left our dad. We went through a little abusive stuff, and she passed away before we could patch up our bond with one another. You know, I could have took more time to work with her, you know.
And was she angry because you went to prison?
Because our mom was always the type that I had to raise her 2 kids. It was 2 under me. So, and then for me to leave her, it's kind of like an abandonment to her.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
She never expressed it, so she just distanced herself from me, and she had 2 sons that I ended up having to raise. While she was out here still just living her life, doing drugs, she never would share her pain with me. Then maybe I would have been able to want to help her.
And she ended up dying before you got a chance to make amends?
Yes, from drugs, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Angela.
Yeah.
So you're telling people not to let that happen?
I'm trying to get that point across because how important our family really is to us, to be to each other.
How is it with the rest of your family?
Well, we associate, but I'm still like a loner type of person. I have 1 son and my sister 2 sons, so I have 3 sons.
All right. So what's your advice to people?
To love each other while they have a chance, and some things can be worked out if they take the time to just talk to one another. You have to share when people are hurting, they should share that with somebody so they can get a solution instead of dying or letting it be someone not, leave this world and they not get to mend. It's sad. It's getting out of control. You got a lot of young babies left with no mothers, and then they don't even have an auntie to support them. And she be alive, and that's crazy to me.
How long were you in prison?
10 years and 2 months.
What'd you do?
I always wanted to have something, forgery, and then caught up with some stupid stuff with a cousin about arson, but it all led to us trying to survive.
Did that experience change you?
Oh, yes, Lord. And I would be dead if it hadn't. And I know that for a fact.
Do you talk about that in the book as well?
Well, that's pretty much in my next book that I have.
Oh, okay.
Called Digging Deeper.
You're going to write another book?
Well, over the time I spent those 10 years in prison, I have like 20 manuscripts completed. Just need to be proofread. So I have a lot of work I already did.
So while you were in prison, that's what you did? You wrote?
That's where I used my time after I got my GED.
Good for you, Angela. You should be very proud of yourself. Cindy Robinson has had a book inside of her whole life, and finally, she has found the strength to write about her difficult journey. It's entitled Inside Out. Cindy, you were the oldest girl of 4 children, and then you say catastrophe struck. Tell us about it.
I was a child of molestation by my father.
Oh.
It is a story of what happens to a girl who grew up in a normal life. I was an Air Force brat. We traveled all around the country. I had a middle-class family, and everything looked like it was going good. But this is what happens to a child, that pieces of, me went missing. I just kept losing control of reality. Hence, you go inside to protect yourself. And that's where this title came, Inside Out. It's about this girl who just keeps losing bits and pieces of herself, and nobody even notices that she's gone because she's just the oldest girl. I wasn't the chosen one. I was the one who was left out. And then just when you find out what catastrophe strikes, then you're propelled into a suspense because now she's fighting not only for her life to get outside, but she's fighting for the inside also to try to live in both worlds because she is put into a juvenile home, and some people there tried to kill her. So it's like the inside is trying to kill her and the outside is trying to kill her, and she just wants to live.
Did you ever get justice?
No, ma'am. I'm a 16-year-old girl, and as soon as my father died, the Georgia police didn't have any use for me anymore, so they just released me.
How did your life end up?
Well, I got married, and of course he said he loved me, so I thought, oh, good. I don't even know what love is, but I've always looked for it, so let's go for it. And of course that's not a basis for marriage. But then I got saved, and God heals me of the pain. And my goal now is to stop incest, because women don't even know what it's like. The most damage that has been done to me is the fact I can't connect to anybody. It was hard for me to connect to even God. It destroys your ability to have a relationship with anyone and anything.
Yeah.
I still struggle with a relationship with people. I just can't connect to them. But I don't have a clue, because all those years I lived inside of myself, because whenever trouble came, I reverted into myself. And what happened to me is it's called dissociative psychosis. I didn't even hear of that word before, ever. In the book, furniture talks to me. The attic would speak to me. Things that was just, I heard a voice, but the voice that I heard wasn't harming me, but the voices that came from the couch and from the attic and from different places. I'd come upstairs, because that's where my dad had molested me once, was in the attic, well, more than once. So.
Did writing this book help you?
Yes.
Yeah.
That little verse, all I wanted was a normal life with lots of love and little strife. But what I got was a turnabout, which left me living inside out.
Thank you so much, Cindy. A very difficult story to write. But, I hope, like you said, it helps others. And you know what, Rob? I hope this show helps others. Listen to these first-time authors. You must relate to one of them on some level. And if they can write their first book, so can you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. But don't forget, you can join us whenever you want, when you download the show anytime you want at 710WOR.iHeart.com. Talk to you soon.